Hello, and thank you for inviting me to speak at this important VBA conference. I'm sure that some of you will have heard me speaking about building safety last time I was in Melbourne in February 2019. The world has changed a lot since then as a result of this dreadful pandemic, which has confined many of us to our homes and to doing business via Zoom and Teams and so on. But one thing which hasn't changed, in fact, I would argue it has become all the more important, is the need for us to ensure that people's homes are fit for purpose and are safe for them to live in. In the last year, as we've gone through 3 separate lockdowns here in the UK, I have often thought how much more difficult things must be for those who are living in high-rise buildings where worries about fire safety and cladding in particular turn what should be their safe havens at a time like this into prisons. Since the publication of my review, Building a Safer Future, in May 2018, I've continued to be very much involved in delivering the changes necessary to ensure that the lasting legacy of the Grenfell Tower tragedy is one where people are able to feel safe and be safe in their homes. For the last year, I've been part of the expert panel, which is advising the Victoria Government on the comprehensive review of building regulation and the need for reform. Our chair, Anna Cronin, is also going to be speaking at this conference, and so I will leave Anna to talk about the progress that we've made to date. Instead, I've been asked to update you on where we are here in the UK and what I believe to be some of the common lessons we all need to learn and to put into practice. It's worth saying up front that the challenge we face here in the UK really divides itself into 2 distinct parts. The first is putting in place a new regulatory regime that will drive culture change throughout the industry and lead to better quality, safer buildings in the future. The second is to deal with the legacy of poor building practices and lack of effective regulation over the last 20 or so years, which has left literally thousands of residents being really concerned about the potential for another Grenfell to happen to their high-rise building. I want to talk about both because the legacy issue holds some important cautionary tales which impinge on the new regime for the future. The decision's been taken in the UK in line with my recommendations to introduce a new regulatory regime for high-rise buildings, which will apply not only to new buildings, but also to those which already exist. There will be a new building safety regulator for all buildings in scope, who will require those responsible for the buildings to demonstrate that the buildings are safe and that they remain safe throughout occupation. What I want to highlight here is the shift in roles and responsibilities. One of the fundamental flaws in the current, and by that I mean the old, system of building regulation, is the onus placed on the regulator to approve the building. The reality is that the level of prescription in current regulation has led to a culture in industry of ticking boxes. At best, doing what the rules say, but in many cases, cutting corners where the rules can be bent or misinterpreted. And I called this in my review the race to the bottom. In the new regime, the role of the regulator will change to one of requiring those with clear responsibility for the building at every stage of its development and use to demonstrate, first of all, what they plan to build, then what they actually build, then how they maintain it, and how building safety is assured at all of those stages. The regulator's role will be to review the safety case and to demand proof of what is being said. New buildings will be subject to a series of gateways in the design and construction process and will only proceed when the regulator is satisfied with what is proposed and the evidence of what has been built. I cannot emphasize enough the importance of this shift in culture. For the industry, it means a shift to a regime which places the responsibility for safety with those who construct and manage the buildings. This will, of course, demand very different levels of competence throughout the whole of the supply chain. A very significant part of my role for the last 2 years has been driving that culture change within industry. I've chaired a steering group which has met with all parts of the built environment sector and continues to hold them to account for making the changes that will be necessary, not just to comply with the rules of the new system when it enters into force, but to take on these new responsibilities and to demonstrate to everyone that they really care about delivering buildings which are safe for residents. Personally, I find it extraordinary that we have let the built environment sector off the hook for so long. None of us would accept a situation where we bought a car or any of the many appliances which we bring into our homes without knowing that their safety had been checked and assured. But that is what we've been doing with the homes we live in for years. There is no means of checking or tracing the materials used or the quality of the work done. All of these things have to change. Those who do the work in building and those who maintain the buildings must be responsible and accountable. A huge team of people have been engaged in reviewing the competencies that will be required across the whole sector to deliver on this change. The details are in the Raising the Bar report, which is publicly available. It covers the roles and responsibilities of architects, designers, product suppliers, installers, and some of the new roles that will be created, which will include the building safety manager, who will be required in all high-rise buildings in occupation. I should add also at this point that the new building safety regulator will be working closely with another new regulatory body which is going to be set up here in the UK, a newly formed construction products regulator. We're also about to embark upon a thorough review of the current products testing regime and how this needs to be strengthened. The bill that will establish the building safety regulator and make the major regulatory changes is complex and has been hailed as a once-in-a-generation change. It's already been through the process of pre-legislative scrutiny and will begin its passage through the UK parliamentary system within the next couple of months. It will take effect in full in 2023, but some elements of it will start to bite as the new regulators move into operation in shadow mode. There's a real sense of confidence here that we're going to see a shift in standards for all future build and end the rotten culture of the past. I also want to emphasize that this regime will not by any means reduce the role of the regulator. It will make it stronger, it will make it more effective, but it will be different. It will be one of holding industry to account and assessing the safety of buildings, not of checking whether rules have been complied with. As I said earlier, one of the big issues which we're now facing is that associated with the existing stock of high-rise buildings. The scope of the new regulatory regime will apply to all residential buildings more than 18 metres or 6 stories high. Our estimate is that in England that amounts to some 12,000 or more existing multiple occupancy buildings. All of these will be subject to the new safety case regime and will require the pulling together of information to demonstrate what was built to the best that people are able to pull that together and to assess the risks. There will be a requirement to add in measures in some of those buildings, undoubtedly, to improve safety. And we are encouraging property owners and building management organisations to get started on this work now, not to wait for legislation to make them do it. Most immediately and most obviously, the focus is on removal and remediation of unsafe cladding on the outside of buildings. But of course, as you all know, that is not the totality of the story. Estimates for the cost of cladding remediation can increase significantly when what is behind the cladding in the fabric of the building itself is also found to be poor. Significant government funds have been made available already to cover the cost of this work, especially in the social housing sector. But where does this leave the owners of private apartments who bought in good faith and who are now facing the prospect not only of having to wholly or partially fund remediation, but also find themselves in a position where they're not able to sell their property if they want to move on? Finance companies are looking for proof of building safety. Why wouldn't they? The market is responding to what we now know. And they are doing that as part of the valuation process, as are property insurers, who are reacting in much the same way. This in turn creates a further problem for those involved in assessment and approval of work, in that professional indemnity cover for them is proving not only costly, but extremely difficult to get in some cases. I'm being honest with you that we face some significant challenges, but I'm confident we will overcome them. We have to work through these issues and we will find solutions. It was simply not an option to apply a new regulatory regime to future build and not to address the problems of the past. I want to finish where I started. This is all about ensuring that residents are safe and feel safe in their homes. Those who choose to live in high-rise buildings are no different, and we cannot leave them to live in fear. We must make this change, we must learn the lessons, and we must share our knowledge with others around the world, like yourselves who are on a similar journey. That is why I'm committed to sticking with this and seeing the changes through, not just here in the UK, but also supporting you in Australia. Thanks for your time, and I hope you have a very good conference.